I'm really glad to see all of you today here. And welcome to our thematic session, one of the thematic session that is organized by Asian Development Bank. So before we start our panel, our discussion with the 6 panelists, let's hear from one of the person who is expertise in this particular topic today, who will provide us a framework for the discussion. Please welcome Dr. Bruce Chong as the Director, CD Advisory and Climate and Urban Sustainability Leader, East Asia from Arup. Please give him a round of applause.
New friends and from all familiar places this afternoon. Basically, my role is very easy. I just resume the key message of today, try to reinforce some message by giving you a little bit more numbers. I hope you're with me in this first 10 minutes before I can't wait to hand over to our panelists for more discussion. Now, we're fortunate enough because this morning we have some individual discussion on decarbonization, on climate resilience, as well as some digital information kind of discussion. Now, we put all things together in one section, and we have decarbonization, resilience, and digitalization, technology and innovations, and with a bunch of experts ranging from environmentalists, policymakers, technologists, IT people, etc. So we look forward to this panel discussion. And again, these 10 minutes, we try to reinforce some messages on how to make low carbon at sea level and towards zero carbon, and then not only on carbon reduction but also hazard, climate hazard reduction, so both reductions, and how to harness technology to achieve the goals of a livable and also decarbonized and resilient city. Now with that, let me be clear first. The bottom line here that we are facing is about how much carbon budget that we have left. Now, according to IPCC, we only, if we want to achieve 1.5 degrees Celsius, and well, today a lot of speakers also mentioned about this, if we want to achieve 1.5, we only have the carbon budget remaining 400 billion tons from the start of 2020. Now, this message is very clear, and now we're in 2023. And by reducing the emissions in 2021 and 2, basically we only have around 280 billions of carbon left. Now this is very clear, and that's why we need to district build the remaining 280 tons of carbon, billions tons of carbon in this area. So this slide basically tells you we need to follow this path if we want to achieve carbon neutrality from now to 2050. Now, so this area, basically this area, under this line, this decarbonization 1.5 degrees Celsius line, basically here, in total from 2020 to 2050, is basically 400 billion tons. Now, the problem here is, in order to achieve this, we need to deeply and quickly have some transformative and revolutionize, this kind of reduction, in order to follow the trend. And obviously, in the past 2 years, we don't know yet in the coming 1 to 2 years if we will go up or down. So if we follow the same pattern, basically the storyline is very clear. So before 2030, we will use up all our carbon budget right now. This is quite worrying because actually, on the one side, in theory, we actually ask for a deep radical reduction for all of our sectors. So the previous slides tell you we need to actually work on the biggest trunk basically. The biggest trunk basically is, you see it in clean power and also electrification, right? And basically get rid and phase out all the fossil fuel. The biggest trunk on energy, as we mentioned, energy transition. And then by sector, you see there are 4 sectors key here, right? Key 4 sectors on number 1, power sector, transport sector, industry sector, as well as building sector. We need to have a very radical, deep cut on the power sector, which is very reasonable because of more mature technologies on solar and wind. And also we have a little bit delay on decarbonization on the second line is on transport, right? Transport, yes, because of electrification. We need to wait for the cell, the battery, to be more mature and pick up this curve. And also industry. Now, industry production is a bit difficult because it's not all rely on electricity. There's a lot of primary fuels, like natural gas needs to be replaced by hydrogen and needs to pick up, right? So a lot of technology, because of industry heavy production, become rely on electricity. Usually we need to rely on the primary energy source because of power density. Now, so we need to have different rates of reductions of all sectors. Now, here on your left-hand side is 1.5 degrees. On your right-hand side is 2.5 degrees. Now, the problem is, are we quick enough? So where are we in Southeast Asia? There's a lot of discussion is around, if in theory we cannot achieve, on the left-hand side, we usually work on the right-hand side because of the actual reality. Now, I'll give you another perspective showing you how quickly we need to achieve on 1.5. But this is on 1.5 trajectory. Now, the third piece we need to talk about is on technology and innovation. Now, this is the actual technology that we need to deploy in the coming 30 years in order to achieve 1.5. Now, if you take a look, we regard nuclear as one of the clean power, as one of the muscles, right? Even nuclear power, relatively more mature, is only 40%, from the ultimate aim. So in other words, another 60%, right, needs to be completed within the 30 years, not to mention other technologies. So those we are familiar, like solar, like hydrogen, solar and wind, it's talking about only less than 5% globally. And so 95 or even more percentage we need to pick up in the coming 25 years or so. So meaning in other words, our manufacturing, our production, right, and the mapping between technology and also the financial institutes, as mentioned earlier this morning, there is a gap. The FI, they need to understand the tech trend, the maturity of the technology and the deployment and the rate of deployment of technology down the road, in individual country, also as a whole in this region, in order to match money and technology. Now, this is a key message that when we think about, 1.5 degrees, this is the challenge. Alarmingly, some people, they ask, if in East Asia, developing countries, they're talking about, we can't achieve 1.5 in time, Bruce, you just mentioned in 8 years' time, we'll be over budget. Yes, it's quite likely that we need to have a plan B, right, over budget. Now, this is sort of the over budget. So basically, it's another scenario, plan B. And then some people, they said, if it's over budget, we can basically compensate by carbon removal because we have the technologies on active carbon absorption as well as forestry, Now, is it correct? Or is it right to say so? It's quite, on carbon appraisal accounting, of course, it can be equalized, it can be net zero by compensate by using carbon removal, offsetting the over budget. But the problem is, don't forget about the tipping point. Now, if we are over 1.5 degrees Celsius, now here with thanks to Guardian, just summarize a very good paper from Science, right, the journal. And then basically I won't tell you all the tipping point, basically just draw you to the, probably the first four you see. When we reach, now we are 1.1 degrees Celsius at the current moment, 1.5, right, is our target. If we are reaching 1.5, meaning if we over 1.5, we will have tons of over tipping point, right? And then the first four tipping points, if we reach 1.5, basically, we will encounter these sort of collapse. Collapse including, as you often heard about, ice sheets melting, and then the coral reef die off, as well as the permafrost suddenly unfrozen. Right now, this is what we need to concern. If we over the budget, we basically cannot compensate it, right? And then, because the tipping point basically is irreversible, we can only compensate on paper. But in practice, in the ecosystem, we basically cannot compensate because it's irreversible. So that's why, in terms of planning, in terms of infrastructure provision, of course, we need to not only consider the plan A, which is 1.5, we need to consider 2.5. Because of adaptation, we need to consider plan B. So that's why we are also, again, in Southeast Asia, we are most vulnerable because of certain typhoons, because of all these different natural hazards, right? The key thing here is we understand that we need to improve our adaptive capacity because we are highly exposed to climate hazard. We need to understand that how much we need to invest. Now, this morning, if you remember, a speaker talked about several billion US dollars from 2 to 4 right, billion US dollars is sufficient per year on decarbonization. But it's not only on decarbonization, it's also on climate resilience. Now this is the loss, in average per year, 0.9, so just running up maybe 90 billion US dollars. So the investment, you need to invest it, you need to compensate for this loss. This would be the cost benefit equation, right? So you need to add it up on top of the carbon reduction, climate hazard reduction. And of course, collaboration again. We need to put 3 I's here. Infrastructure, institutions, and information is necessary for a resilient city. So infrastructure, I think everybody know mitigation and adaptive capacity of our infrastructure of all different disciplines. And institutions, we talk about disclosure. Another voice of mine talk about 3 Ds, disclosure. And then the last D, the second D is digitalization. So basically echo the last I here, information. Right? So disclosure, institutions, so we need to have the sort of framework to request the government as well as private sectors to disclose how risky their business are. So the whole supply chain, private and public sector. So basically the concept is similar to carbon reduction. If everybody is willing to cut their carbon, basically our scope 3 reductions can be reduced. Right? Because other companies we do the scope 1 and 2. So we can enjoy the collective reduction altogether. And at the same token, resilience, when we improve our resilience, when we reduce our risk in my company, basically, your supply chain will also get a benefit. So this is the same concept applying in both carbon and resilience, right? And moving to the last 2 slides. Now we understand we need to have both decarbonization and climate resilience improvement, and we understand the fact that we need to invest in climate adaptation. Now, talking about the money, as I mentioned earlier, this morning also, in Asia, the number is, total investment is around 200 billion on decarbonization. Now the point here I would like to draw your attention is not the total investment in decarbonization, because this morning our speakers already shared with us, in terms of investment on decarbonization, around 2 to 4, right? 200 to 400, several $100 billion sufficient per year for Southeast Asia. The question is not about the total amount. The problem here is about the allocation of where the money is to. Where the money is to. Now this is a ratio. The total is 213, but the ratio between the investment in green as well as fossil fuel is 0.8. So simply speaking, is that the investment in green finance is even less than the fossil fuel. And the suggestion today we call is 4 to 1. Now 4 to 1, where the numbers come from? Basically, is if we again want to achieve 1.5 degrees Celsius, the ratio of our investment on green versus fossil fuel needs to be at least, right? Here, as you see the number, 4.1 minimum. Global factor is 0.9. And then Asia, as you see here, 0.8. Right? So we're still far from the suggested KPI. But there are also, of course, other issues. This is the numbers from banks, meaning they borrow money to companies making investment in both new energy and fossil fuel industry. But we need to also have similar numbers also imposed on our energy player, our dirty industry player, force them to give out this number in order to show the commitment, or their commitment, not only banks, because they can also give to SME and other companies, but not necessarily energy companies. They have a lot of investment, a lot of incomes, a lot of their revenues, they do it internally. But talking about their own portion of investment on green, talking about their internal transformation, we need to have similar kind of KPI to address this issue and monitor collectively. So this is the last message I would like to convey to all of you. And with that, I look forward to our discussion today. So over to you, Dina. Thank you very much.
Let's dive into the panel session. Are you ready? Okay. The first round, we split the question to 2 rounds. The first round is an open questions. We have around 18 minutes. The first question I'm gonna ask is to Ibu Myrna. Yeah, Ibu Myrna, we already heard the introduction that Pak Bambang gave just now, and President Jokowi, himself already mentioned that Nusantara as a city that is not only livable but lovable. This is an interesting statement from both of the people. So how do you think net zero designs can be lovable to the communities of Nusantara in the future?
Yes, well, simply speaking is to provide the people with a better and healthy environment, and also to provide them with clean water, energy, and also healthy food. But the most important thing is how we can achieve that. So in Nusantara, as in the earlier plenary session, Mr. Bambang Susantono told us that we apply the concept of smart and sustainable forest city. Why it should be a forest city? Because the location where the city now is, developing, in the past was the area where the Borneo tropical rainforest exists. But because of, several decades of the extractive industries, due to logging, palm oil, and also coal mining, the majority of the area now being degraded. So the idea of having Nusantara as the capital city basically is not only to build the city, but also to recover, to restore the degraded ecosystem there. So that's basically the idea behind the smart and sustainable forest city of Nusantara. And then there, of course, there will be several activities that will be carried out, such as first to reforest the degraded land and forest, and also to very serious in developing water management in order to mitigate the disaster and also to provide fresh water for the people. And then we will also have some plots of the climate resilient agriculture, and then smart waste management, and also to apply clean energy for the transportation and also the electricity supply. Then I think those could be an example about our policy in developing Nusantara as the new capital of Indonesia.
Okay, thank you, Bu Myrna. I want to give you an update. So for us, Indonesian, this is a really important time because we're moving our capital city from Jakarta to Kalimantan. So this is a big homework for us, Indonesian, and especially for the government. Thank you, Bu Myrna. So I'm going to move to Safiah from Arup. So the question is, there are multiple challenges to overcome in cities planning, of course. What are some of the processes or tools that can be used to prioritize low carbon and resilient investments?
Yeah, thank you, Dina, and maybe thank you, ADB, for the opportunity to collaborate on this panel. I think you mentioned it in the opening that there are a lot of complexity and challenges in cities and lots of different interests. I think there's an opportunity to create a robust prioritization framework that can focus on impact, thinking about multiple benefits and how we can think about the different investment opportunities or infrastructure through that robust framework, thinking about how a piece of infrastructure or investment can deliver benefits across economic, social, and environmental components. And importantly, I think they need to be able to deliver on multiple benefits, not just one. I think one example is the Nusantara Urban Design Framework that Arup had the opportunity to work with the government of Indonesia on. There was a very clear vision for a world-class city for all, and I think a net zero carbon city for all. And from that, there were very clear statements around principles and outcomes, and then 24 key performance indicators underneath that. So a very robust structure to be able to think about how we move through the design process. And we've seen that already through the review of some of the spatial designs, which we've used those KPIs. And there's an opportunity to use that framework again as investments come in and new projects come in for the project.
Okay, Okay, thank you, Safiah. So we're gonna move to the next question for Ling. Hi, Ling, from AWS. So, Ling, what are some of the emerging and enabling digital technologies? When we're talking about smart cities, we're talking about technologies, of course. What are some of the emerging and enabling digital technologies that can decarbonize infrastructure of cities and enable them to become more climate resilient?
Thank you. And Ibu, it's such an interesting time, right? Because we're building a city completely new, and at the time where there's so many technologies coming up as well. So let me just walk through some of the brief technologies out there across the urban sectors. And if you remember the charts that Bruce showed earlier, the different sectors in the urban, in terms of transport especially, there's a lot of technology using AI and ML to optimize traffic flow. And here in Indonesia, we already have a company, Safitri, which piloted a CCTV ML-based solution to optimize traffic in West Java, I believe. So those are one example, not to mention using of AI ML to plan the traffic, to plan, for example, share mobility and so on. So it can really help us find the right optimized way to organize transport. In terms of building, which is the main culprit of the urban carbon emission, we're seeing the rise of digital twins, especially from the very early onset of the construction itself. So we have, in fact, a partner doing a solution whereby the moment you start the construction, you build a digital twin model, and that model lives on until the day you hand over to the asset manager. And instead of stacks of paper, that digital twin model literally become your handover document. And so with that, you know exactly, let's say day 34 of the construction, where is it? Or in terms of the electricity configuration of the building, how is it done? So you know exactly through that. And then the asset managers can use that same digital twin to manage throughout the life cycle of the building, so that overall, we have the construction that is efficient, the building that is sustainable, and then you can really use that to manage the energy consumption of the building. We really love that model, and the digital twin, the same technology has been used for optimize not only in construction, but also for energy consumption, for water utility as well. So it's really a really great technology to have. Obviously, in energy, we also talk about the using of smart meter or building a smart grid, which I think is not technically new, but we are seeing more and more optimization using IoT services that can really collect the different device, the data from different devices, and help the utility themselves to enhance the operation of the utility. And not to forget smart waste, which is increasing, is an important sector, but oftentimes, because the way we finance waste in our cities often get forgotten. But waste, we're seeing a lot of optimization in collection and sorting of recyclables as well. So our partner Rubicon in the US has helped city of Harrisonburg to optimize so that each collection route would save 61 minutes. And through that, the city has saved $194,000 a year purely on the optimization of the collection and recyclable. So these are some highlights for Ibu and Nusantara to consider as you go on to build this exciting journey.
Okay, thank you, Ling. That's kind of technology that I expected Nusantara would have in the future. I hope so, Bu Myrna. So I'm gonna jump to Susan. Hi, Susan. The question for you. So we have several the businesses perspective here. The push for net zero emissions in cities is driving businesses to create more ambitious targets for reducing their carbon footprints. How do you think the private sector can further play a key role in helping cities accelerate the transition to a net zero in the future while doing the business itself?
It's a good question. because I do believe that's a $1 million question, because we can't do it alone. Governments can't do it alone. Businesses even as big as Hitachi cannot do it alone. But we have to incentivize business. Ultimately, they're a business, and there has to be a path to revenue. And you can incentivize two ways. You can either have a carrot or a stick, okay? And the stick works up to a point. So legislation works up to a point. And if you can't bring them along on the journey that they actually want to commit, innovate, invest in businesses, if there's no real incentive for them, it'll only take you that far. So I'm passionate about the carrot. So if we can make it possible for business and say there is a path to revenue. Because if you're looking at, say you have to decarbonize your bus routes. To run one bus, you need the infrastructure. Not 100, you need the infrastructure in there. To do that, you need businesses like Hitachi to say, we will come and invest, put the infrastructure in, you pay me per kilowatt, argument's sake. Because ultimately, if the government has to do it, it's the taxpayers doing it. The taxpayers is paying for the infrastructure for one bus. If you've got one bus and 100, you need the infrastructure. I'm saying is we need to be clever. We need to look at the incentives and say, you know, we have a lot of businesses, a lot of cities where corporates want to do the right thing. Their heart is there. But let me use an example of solar. They want to put solar on their roofs. But some infrastructure, some legislation will not allow them to sell back that extra to the grid because the grid is aging, et cetera, et cetera. Good reasons, but now the corporate is saying it's not worth my while to actually participate and put that investment in. So if we can just, the timing scares me. The timing that Bruce talked about scares me. Because, and again, a lot of our clients, they've got good intentions. I've got one council that put Wi-Fi in the middle of a city. But it took so long to go through the governance, all good. It went so long through the procurement process. By the time they put the Wi-Fi in the middle of the city, 5G was there. So we've got two problems. Firstly is that the technology is growing so fast. 10 years ago, guys, if you think of how much it's grown, technology is growing, but so we've got that one thing. On the other hand, we've got this 2050 over our heads. So we have to come together, and I do believe that we can really do it together. If we put, they asked me about some successful projects that Hitachi has done. And you know where we were successful is where like-minded people got together. Said, I know it's tough, I know it's hard, but we can do it and we can do it together.
Thank you, Susan. I couldn't be more agree with you with your answer. Just we talk about right now. We need to be sustainable. The sustainability needs to be sustainable. Yeah. So the next question is for Lauren. So as Susan mentioned that individual cities alone will not be able to deliver net zero ambitions. What do you think is the opportunity for a network of cities, in particular Southeast Asian cities, to work together to deliver greater impact to the goal?
Thank you, Dina. And I also just want to thank ADB for bringing us all together and for this opportunity to speak with all of you as an ADB alumna. It's really great to see this forum, and also to the government of Indonesia for hosting us here. It's great to be back in Bali after a while. I think, you know, the answer to the question has to tweak the question a little bit, in that it's more than net zero, and the title of this panel was Net Zero and Resilient Cities. And I think it's really important to acknowledge, and Amitabh Kant did a very good job of acknowledging this morning, that this region is, you know, a climate taker in many ways, not a climate maker at this point. It can be, and we see the huge opportunity for that in what Bruce presented and in what the gentleman from McKinsey presented as well. But the risk is very real. And no matter what we do in terms of net zero, the storms and the floods are already here. The heat waves are here. We're experiencing them every year. So we have to create change at scale. And therein lies the power of networks. Because what we need to do is actually design investments that are greater than the sum of their parts, right? When we design for net zero alone, right, and we do energy efficiency in a building, but we don't take that opportunity to actually address the risk of floods or the use of water in that building, then we've missed a huge opportunity. So we need to actually do things in a joined up way. And I think that the answer to the poll question, I'm very encouraged to see some of the results, are actually looking at doing things in a joined up way. And so essentially networks have two roles to play. The first is in providing transformative knowledge. And if you think about it, when is the last time you changed your behavior? Is it because you read a lot or because one of your friends said, hey, I just tried this, it was great? Cities operate much in the same way. Last week, I was in New York and we met with a number of our mayors from different regions. And they give each other advice much in the same way you give your friends advice. I changed this policy and it did something transformative. So in that way, networks can share from leaders to leaders, and then change can happen much more quickly. The second role that networks play is that we provide an opportunity to scale. It takes a lot of work for businesses to go to individual cities and market a solution, right? What we can do as city networks is we aggregate the demand of our city members to do projects at the same time. And so then you have a dual benefit there. We share knowledge among the cities so we can move faster, and then we aggregate demand so that we can scale solutions.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. So that is the benefit to the network, 2 points that you highlighted. So the last question for the first round is for Joris. So the question is, in order to catalyze the transformation required for designing and implementing net zero city action plans, financial institutions have an important role, as we know, to play in unlocking capital. That we already discussed this morning. How does ADB enable cities in Southeast Asia to adopt innovative financing mechanisms?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dina, and thanks also for fellow panelists and Arup to co-design this session. I think this again is another $1 million question, but to some extent it's the same. Our financing from an institution such as ADB, we do about $35 billion in annual new lending. That's nothing compared to the needs, of course. So the key here is indeed how can you leverage additional private sector financing? How do you leverage additional, climate financing, particularly? And here the key also, again, coming back to Ibu Myrna and Nusantara, the government of Indonesia has already very clearly indicated, this is going to be a massive project. But we, as the government of Indonesia, we can only, at this stage, finance about 20%. So we need to get private sectors, such as Hitachi and others on board to be able to realize that dream of a smart, sustainable forest city. We, as ADB itself, are seeing us as one area where we are very much growing is in what we call blended financing. So mixing, our financing with government finance, with private sector financing, under the umbrella, of course, of trying to do the right thing when it comes down to climate change and addressing resilience. Now, that blended financing sounds sometimes to me is actually a bit of the wrong word, because blending, I think of a cocktail guy who puts all kind of things in a bucket and then starts to shake it. I think it's much more of orchestrated financing to see what financing works best for which solution and how you can, in a very delicate manner, put that together into a wonderful symphony of music. So my efforts to try and convince my colleagues who are working for blended finance to call themselves, orchestrated financing have not resulted in anything yet. But I think that's what we're trying to do also in terms of our support to the government of Indonesia, to see what it is that we can do with our credibility and our credit ratings to bring in different financing. The trick here, though, is that cities are at a very difficult position here, because while national governments, they have leverage, city governments, and there again a network comes in terms of how to get cities to access financing as a group, probably much more easier than as an individual city. So this is where also for us, we are working normally with national governments, so how to go to the subnational government level, where the needs are the biggest and where the solutions have to come. That is one of the key challenges, Dina. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Joris, for your answer. And that's the first round of our session. That was an insightful answers from each of the panelists. Let's give it a round of applause for the 6 panelists. So we're gonna dive into the second round. The second round is the targeted questions focused on sharing actual examples and case studies. The first question that I'm gonna ask is for Susan. So Susan, we know that partnerships across different parts of the city systems with people with different domain backgrounds are important. What are some surprising or interesting partnerships that Hitachi has developed that have delivered great outcomes across people with different backgrounds?
Thank you. Just give me 1 minute, if I can just maybe paint the picture in terms of Hitachi, because people, if I say I work for Hitachi, they say, do I make a refrigerator? And I don't, but they do, and it's really good ones. But Hitachi has got a very broad space, so we from energy and mobility, we up to even nuclear power, EV, mobility, we make battery trains, electric trains, etc. And I've got a case study in terms of train partnerships that goes to a company being willing to invest in the long run, where we did a project with the UK government where we built the trains, we invested the train, we own the train, and they only pay us per seats delivered. That is the power, but there was a path to revenue for Hitachi. They were happy to do that. They built a factory, they employed people, and the manufacturing was actually done on site. So, and we also in IT, so IT we're very strong. We did a project with a government in Europe that said they wanted to fast track their EV deployment, but they had an old grid. But they couldn't wait, they didn't have the money to actually upgrade the grid, and they said, okay, work with us. We had 8,000 vehicles. Some were charged at home, so public charging. Some were charged at depots, and some was charged in street level, so Ubers. And they said, all right, so without having to upgrade the grid, could AI, machine learning, help us to optimize and actually charge these vehicles? And it could. So we've taken that learning. It was a 4-year project, and we actually now rolling out that software and that intelligence. But again, it was a council came to us, we have this problem, we can't invest in a new grid. Are you willing to walk the talk? Are you willing to have skin in the game, do the investment, and there's a path to revenue for business? And the learnings from that is profound, guys. Because imagine if you have to do a new bus, you have to electrify your bus route. You don't have to upgrade your grid, but you have to be connected. It has to be integrated. You have to know this bus needs to travel X amount of kilometers tomorrow, and it needs X amount of charge. And a human cannot do that, but AI and ML can do that. And the last example is actually very practical. We do water as well. So we partnered with Philinvest in the Philippines, where we do water desalinization, and I can't say that word, but desalinization. We do water purification and wastewater, and we can even ship a container to a village that doesn't have power, and we can actually desalinize water by using solar. So the bottom line is the technology is there. It is there. The willingness is there. We just need to put our heads together and say, how can we make it worthwhile for everybody?
Okay, thank you, Susan, for your answer and the examples. So I'm just informed that we already have a really limited time here. So I hope that you can answer the next questions in the to the point. But Susan, that is it's insightful answers still from you. So the next question is for Ling. We saw from the theme of International Women's Day that we need to deliberate action for inclusion of women into digital technology. This is an interesting topic. What are some of the examples from AWS that have supported shaping a safer, more inclusive and equitable digital world for all?
Thank you. And in fact, within the city's context, there's a lot of solutions that we've already been using. From the very targeted one, such as a autonomous wheelchair by our partner Will, which has been deployed already. And now, if you fly through Haneda Airport, there's already autonomous wheelchair running around. And if you look at broader from a city perspective, right? How do we design more inclusive way for everyone to be involved, everyone to get information? So things like a chatbot that allow everyone to get information on COVID, which is done in West Java as well, or a way for everyone to get education on cloud, right? Which is what we are trying to do more and more at AWS to ensure that there is a population of youngsters who grow up and ready and familiar with the cloud. And so since 2017, in fact, we've been training 700,000 young adults in Southeast Asia through our different training programs so that they can be familiar with cloud and cloud technology and be ready to deploy these solutions. And last but not least, I think I would want to go back to a point earlier, which is, as a government, how do I make it work, right? The question is, where do I find, and as Lauren said, how do I find a solution that's been done, proven elsewhere before? This is why we launched the Smart City Competency Program last year, so that we at AWS would take the burden of validating all of these solutions and ensure that they are inclusive, ensure that they are sustainable, ensure that they are well architected, and most of all, they fulfill and meet these requirements in terms of KPI, right? And as a government, you can go on to the platform, which is Solution Finder platform, and select these partners with such a solution, and resting assured that these solutions have already been validated. So I'll leave my answer as that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. So the next question is for Joris. So Joris, across Southeast Asia, we see the influence of the private sector in city shaping development, especially across large infrastructure. Can you share some good examples of the private and public sectors working together to deliver common outcomes? And what were some of the ingredients to make this a success, such as policies or subsidies you implemented that work well?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think if you look at a city anytime, what you see is buildings. And buildings are to a large extent not financed by the public sector. They're private sectors, real estate development. So I think, and if we talk about the financing of cities, we often forget about the power of the real estate sector. They're really, really very important. But indeed, it's about the carrot and stick. How do you make sure that within the regulatory environment, you provide a framework for private sector to contribute to the development of the city and then have the right incentives in place. Two examples, and both from Jakarta actually, where I really quite hopeful in terms of what private sector can do. In one of the oldest shopping centers in Jakarta is Sarina. It had the first McDonald's of the country, and it was really, I remember I went there when I arrived in Indonesia 22 years ago, and I was really, it was, for the longest time actually wasn't a no-go place. And now all of a sudden it's become this buzz of activity because it has a high quality space. It wasn't cheap, about 60 million was invested by private sector, but it's really a place where people want to be. And that in itself gives me a lot of hope for also how in Nusantara, private sector can shape pleasant places for people to come. And another one is that actually in anticipation of the capital moving to Nusantara, a lot of the buildings currently occupied by government offices, and they will also be empty. And this, of course, creates also a very important time for thinking about what Jakarta is all about and how those offices which will be emptied, should it be another mall? Should it be another very high, expensive real estate development? Or could this be areas which are used to enhance the overall livability of Jakarta and the overall resilience of Jakarta. So I think definitely there, again, private sector plays a hugely important role, and for us to work with the government on trying to identify what these incentives are and how to cost them and how to make sure that the legislative framework around there for the carriage are in place. That definitely is something which we would be very excited in. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Joris. Sarina is a really good example where private sectors and government can work together to deliver common. So, have you visited Sarina yourself? After the...
Pasti dong. How can I talk about it if I haven't,
okay,
been
sure.
there? Yeah,
if you visit it again, let me know so we can talk there.
My pleasure.
Okay, so the next question is for Lauren. Lauren, we've seen targets being set for net zero emissions across countries, cities, and companies. What are some of the good tools that you have seen to keep these actors accountable to act towards these targets?
Thank you, Dina. I think there are a number of tools that many different cities are using to track their commitments. I mean, you see tools that have derived from the science-based targets. The Global Covenant of Mayors has developed a very large tracking tool that cities around the world are submitting their net zero and adaptation-related projects and targets. I think when we talk about what cities are doing, more and more the interest is going towards what are the frameworks and tools that cities can use to plan those investments and to show that there are these benefits. And in that, a lot of the work that Resilient Cities Network has been doing has been with our close partners, Arup being one of them. We've developed a tool around city resilience and water, and also around energy for those investments that really show how you can both decarbonize as well as protect vulnerable communities. We're also working with the S&P Global Foundation, in particular in the energy space, around helping to translate these kind of tools for the market. I think we've talked a lot about the importance of leveraging public and private financing together, or just leveraging private finance to deliver on these goals. And so a lot of the work that we're doing now with our cities is about articulating those projects and needs and goals, and then translating them into language that the market can understand and that the market can get behind.
Thank you, Lauren, for the answer. So we're going to jump to the next question as we have a really limited time here. So the next question is for Safiah. Alongside institutions and private actors, what role can the community hold to support and accelerate climate transition for cities, Safiah?
Yeah, I think the community can play a really big role in the co-creation of low carbon development. I think the first poll showed that people really resonated with the opportunity around inclusive design. I think there's an opportunity to kind of get closer to communities, to understand experiences and work together with them to develop solutions and test those and provide feedback to help scale up solutions and create greater change. There's some work that we're doing in Semarang at the moment with some communities, with women and girls, with people with disabilities and older people. We're working together to understand their experiences moving around Semarang and have the opportunity now to develop some tactical urbanism as an opportunity to really be able to test the implementation of something, see what happens when it is implemented, and get feedback, get immediate feedback in order to provide the opportunity to scale across Semarang city as well as other cities across Indonesia.
Okay, thank you, Safiah, for your answer. So the last question in this second round, I'm going to ask to Bu Myrna. Bu Myrna, we could say that design is a success when we see a clear and ambitious vision being implemented on the ground. What are the key processes or tools to take the design to implementation? Maybe you can talk especially for Nusantara.
Yes, regarding the tools, I think we are lucky to have one very clear planning because we have a master plan and also the KPI. And then for the climate change, we are now in the process of making the roadmap of net zero cities for Nusantara. And also we have policy. For example, we are now in the process of finalizing a policy of doing moratorium for the new coal mining permits. And then at the action level, we did with the support of other government agencies and also with other stakeholders, we continuing reforesting the forest and land. And finally, just to highlight what Safiah said, that engagement, particularly for the community engagement, is very, very key important factors to make this issue not just a government program, but it is really a people's movement.
Okay, thank you, Bu Myrna. And that's the second round of the panel. Let's give the 6 panelists a round of applause today. So now we begin to the question and answer from the attendees, both in person. Can we ask the attendees virtually? No, okay. So we're gonna have the question from the floor. First, can the team help? You can, yeah.
Hello everyone, I'm Joris, I live in Bali. I came from Europe straight to Bali. I'm interested in how you manage, especially you mentioned, Suzanne, that technology is evolving very fast. So how do you anticipate in your own organization and with your partners, like how do you shoot at this next technologies like fusion, if we talk about energy, or distributed energy, instead of thinking centralized, all these things, to have a more exponential mindset than linear. So how do you cope with that?
Okay, so, yeah.
I knew I was going to get the difficult one, and I did. No, I was thinking, how do you eat an elephant? A bite at a time. So we know that it's moving so fast, but sometimes because the task is so big and it's moving so fast, it's easy to go and do nothing. Hydrogen is an example. We know it's going there, but it's taking so long and it's so expensive, but it has to go there. So to answer your question, I hope it does answer your question. We have to do what we can do now, but build a plan in a way that we can be ready for that next level. Let me take hydrogen and EV. So EV buses. If you can get a bus that can do both, or know that you'll do a little bit now, but you know that this is where you want to go to. Because the problem is, the problem could be that because technology is moving so fast, we won't do anything now. We'll just say, and also governments will not invest because they don't want to make a mistake. They say, how do I know this battery? And we get it all the time with EV batteries. How do I know that this is the best and the latest? And you can we build contingencies in for them. For instance, with batteries, we own the battery. We give it to them as a service. So it takes that fear factor of making a mistake out of the equation. Because if we own the battery, they use the battery. If newer, better technology comes along, we give them the newer, better technology. I hope that answers your question.
Hi, this is Chintan. I think the question is for anyone in the panel, because the topic is net zero cities for tomorrow, and everyone spoke about 2050, 2060. I would love to know, including Indonesia, has said that it's going to peak in 2030, which is 7 years away, which means 2031, 1st of January, the country is producing less energy than 31st of December, 2030. What are your thoughts on whether that's possible in the world and whether we can do it, and what are the issues around that?
Actually, when Bruce was giving this presentation earlier, I was actually, I mean, it is very daunting, scary, and luckily there's a reception later where maybe there's some alcoholic beverages which can help us to kind of deal with that. But at the same time, one thing for me which is clear, Chitan, is that whatever it is in terms of us being able to turn that around, it has to be in cities where that has to happen. That's where the change is, where the challenges are most clear, where the leadership is, I think, where the environment to experiment is. We just need to make sure that, again, carrot and stick, we just need to make sure that there's more and more carrots going into the direction of the local governments so that they actually can live up to that anticipated role, or the role which they are actually already, taking on. So yeah, that's why maybe Soren wants to add a bit more to that.
I'm happy to. I think that you're right, Joris, in that it's really about scale. And it's about inspiration, because the challenges are so daunting that we could easily, and I think you said this, Susan, sit back and say, oh, it's not possible. It's just too scary. We can't deal with it. And I think the very important thing to be clear about and to continue to communicate, and this is where the role of media is so important, is to turn down the noise, right? Turn down, oh, Ukraine makes it different. Turn down, right? Supply chains make it different, make it too hard, and just say, no, there's our North Star or the Southern Cross, depending on what hemisphere you subscribe to. And that's where we need to go. And here are those pathways. So what is my role? So number one is commit to the goal. Number two is understand your role, right? And share those roles amongst the different actors, increase that accountability, and then just stay energized, right? We have to keep encouraging one another that it's possible, right? We're in it together, and it's going to be possible. It's going to be hard. It's going to require massive change. But if we keep repeating that mantra that actually it is possible and we can do it together, the technologies, most of them are there. Right? And if you look at the literature, most of what we need to make the change is already existing, right? We just have to use it effectively in the places where it's most needed. And I think that's why there's 5,000 people online for this forum, because this is one of the regions where there is so much possibility.
And taking one step is better than nothing at all. So we have to take that step first. So to close the session, I'm gonna ask each of you the most important, not the most important, but this is the magic one question actually. The question is, if you could change one thing, whether it's from your background or expertise or not, it's up to you, to make the biggest impact on resilient and net zero cities, what would it be?
Yeah, I think maybe following up on some of Lauren's comments, I think it'd be great to see a really large-scale shift in the narrative of how we talk about beautiful, healthy, livable cities that embed low-carbon development. We talk about living small, having larger communal spaces, about getting around through healthy, walkable streets. I think having that conversation as normalized is really important, and celebrating that, and therefore giving the responsibility to all citizens that it is our responsibility for low carbon development, and then that enabling the pressure to leadership to make those decisions.
Yeah, I work for Asian Development Bank, so I have to say something about financing. So it wouldn't be that financing for doing the right things, as what Safiah has talked about, that's much more easily available. That it's, you don't have to jump through 100 hoops in order to get financing to do something which is really going to get a lot of impact. Thanks.
I think, Lauren, we need to stop telling ourselves it's too hard, because then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's too hard, and we don't do it. This can be done. We've got a lot of intelligent people in the room, and we've got companies that's committed to this, that's bought into this. So from now on, it's not hard anymore. We can do it one bite at a time.
I think if there is one thing that's achievable, stop building data centers. I know a lot of data center projects are still going on, which I really don't understand why. So stop building new data centers and go to cloud instead. And we also help with your question earlier on how do we keep up with the technology, constantly, come up with new services, and that's how we stay in trend, stay connected. Thank you.
Okay.
For me, it's being consistent in the narratives, policy, and action in order to achieve what we are already talk about it.
You work for Amazon, you work for ADB. I work for mayors and city leaders. And very often what's so difficult for those leaders is that the politics gets in the way. And so sometimes national level politics or other regional politics block collaborative action.
I can see some nods here.
Yeah. So I think that having that alignment, right, having that transparency to say, here's where the risk is, it's in my city, and I want to do this, I need financing, I need tools, I need partners for it, and having that be aligned and having the politics, if I could wave a magic wand, is to take that out of it, right, and actually put the common good put the needs of urban residents and the beneficiaries first, that's what I would do. And I think that that's what our mayors and our governors and our city commissioners would do.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. Please give the big round of applause to close the panel today. And that's it for the session today. I hope you get the insightful perspective from the 6 panels. And thank you for all of you today to attend the session. And that's it. I'm Dina Guning, and I hope you have a good day.